Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted and honored to be your host for Choice, your creative superpower, coming to you from Oakland, California, each Thursday at 12 noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. We are here to explore how wielding your superpower for the greatest good can co-create a most fulfilling life experience. For those of you coming back, it's great to see you here again. If this is your first time, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I'm a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network. I'm also a transformational coach. Both my ministry as a practitioner and my mission as a coach are to help people live their lives to the fullest. So today, in episode 65, we'll be exploring the relationship between choice and caregiving. This is another one of those topics that needs to come with a warning of sorts. Whether you've been a caregiver, a recipient of care yourself, or you're contemplating a future possibility of caregiving, many emotions can be stirred up. So be aware of your state of mind as we go through this episode today. Be compassionate with yourself. Do whatever it is that you need to do to allow yourself to be open to this exploration. Hello, Shay. Excellent. We're all in the right place. All right, so let's begin. There are aspects to caregiving which can bring comfort, and there are aspects which can bring significant challenges. Our choices play a part in virtually all aspects of caregiving. Now, for today's exploration, I'm going to limit myself to the relationships between choice and caregiving for another person. Okay, but the relationship between choice and self-care is an equally robust exploration. So I'll be covering that in a separate episode in 2 weeks. Please note that I am specifically choosing to use the word caregiver rather than caretaker. Okay. The terms might seem to be similar, caretaking, caregiving, but there are significant differences. A caretaker often refers to a paid professional, somebody who's responsible for things like the safety and the health and the well-being of another person, or someone who's responsible for a thing, like, for example, a garden, a building, etc. On the other hand, a caregiver is an unpaid role. And yes, I am excluding medical professionals and volunteers working with those professionals who might very well be involved in someone's care. Now, this is not just a matter of semantics, okay? Because I want you to understand that there is very definitely a difference between the idea of giving care and taking care. Okay. If you do not see the difference between the two, there are definitely circumstances and times that this can really make things difficult. So, yes, it is a matter of a frame of mind. So let's talk about what a caregiver is. A caregiver, very often a family member or a friend, and a caregiver is usually motivated by the closeness of their relationship to the person to whom they're giving care. It could be by love. It could even be a lifelong commitment. But all of these are as opposed to earning a salary, as opposed to getting paid. Okay, so I want to just back up for a moment. And we're talking about choice and caregiving. So the first choice in caregiving would basically be whether or not someone would take on the responsibility in the first place. So if, and this is a very big if, it's all capital letters, if someone takes on this responsibility, but they're doing so out of a sense of obligation, that they see it as a requirement rather than a true choice, there can be any number of unfortunate occurrences for the reluctant caregiver. And I've certainly seen that at times people can become very resentful, angry, depressed. They can feel trapped. Even the person who's receiving the care can be negatively affected. If the caregiver is giving off this vibe of this being a burden, this being problematic, the person receiving the care might very well feel that emotional toll. Right? And if they do notice it, that's going to lead potentially, not always, but certainly possible, and I've seen this happen again and again, it can lead to the person being cared for to express their own feelings of depression, shame, or guilt, because the way they think of it is they've put this person in this position that they don't want to be in. Even when people are working with a caregiver that loves them and is doing this out of absolutely no sense of obligation whatsoever, but truly a matter of their connection, even then, the person who is receiving care could feel that they're a burden. All right, so it's really important that we become as aware as possible of what's going on in this relationship. Let's face it, we know life is rarely a simple, clear, straightforward journey. And caregiving is definitely a prime example of that. For example, this is a situation I've seen with a number of people. Let's say that there are a number of siblings dealing with the care of one of their parents. On the one hand, while it would be absolutely wonderful for the care to be given equally by all of the siblings, that is not often the case. There can be financial issues. There could be timing issues. There could be location and other logistics, as well as the nature of the relationship each sibling had with their parent and vice versa. So who provides the care, when, where, and how they do so, or don't, all of those contribute to the perspective and therefore to the nature of the interactions between the caregiver and the person being cared for. If one of the if one of the siblings feels drawn to care for their parent out of love and respect, their experience is likely to be more fulfilling than if a sibling were to be pushed or shamed into doing so. I wish I had some magic solution that I could give you that would work in every situation. But the reality is, choosing to be a caregiver at least removes the impairment brought on by guilt or coercion. So now that someone has chosen to be a caregiver, what other choices can be made regarding that care that are important to consider? I mentioned the example of a person providing care for their parent and noted that the previously established relationship has a definite impact on both the carer and the cared for. For example, let's say the parent has traditionally been very domineering, very dominating, and seeing a reversal of power, to use that terminology, can be extremely difficult for both parties. And if a parent has indeed been very domineering and very dominating, they probably would see it as a reversal of power. That needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed quickly. It needs to be addressed explicitly, which makes the choice to establish boundaries and ground rules of paramount importance. Choosing to ensure that the person cared for is treated with dignity, to whatever extent that that is possible, is an important discussion, or even a series of discussions, all right, that will benefit everyone. It's a good point, Wayne. What we're really doing is caring about them, not caring for them. Yes, that would be the difference, I think, between caregiving and caretaking. Well said. My own experience after having several surgeries, for example, provided me with a greater insight and significantly more compassion, as I remember the frustration of being unable to perform even the simplest of everyday tasks without assistance. Not many times that you can really feel joyful because you put your own socks on, but it's true. So depending on what condition or circumstance that required the care, whatever that happened to be, frustration may be less of a concern than dignity itself. As a caregiver, choosing to be aware of and sensitive to the emotions of the person being cared for, that can be the difference between the best possible experience given the circumstances and a rather difficult one. So we can see that awareness of one's own frame of mind, as well as that of the person being cared for, can lead to better choices and a better experience. Hey, Wayne, you're on fire today, man. Seniors need touches too. Absolutely. One of the things that often happens when people are in a situation where they need to be cared for is they become more isolated for any one of a number of reasons. And we are people who, well, we're people who need people. We are a gregarious bunch, by and large. But again, you have to consider the person you're caring for. What is it that resonates with them? So the choices that are made by the caregiver are only a part of the equation, right? Because the person being cared for may very well have their own choices. And it's absolutely important for each of the parties to work through what each of them would prefer so they can reach what we would hopefully see as a mutually acceptable approach. I find the people who are particularly good at caregiving tend to be people who have been recipients of care themselves, or have witnessed how well or how badly it can be done. But it's about that awareness. It's about that being present. When people are indisposed, being able to be in control of their life, any aspect of their life, becomes challenging, and it can lead to frustration, resentment, anger, depression. So what can we choose to do that's going to help take that edge off? We can choose a collaborative approach to caregiving, whenever and however that can be done. Sometimes the simplest thing can have a real benefit. Allowing the person being cared for to make as many choices as they are comfortable doing can give them a sense of control, at least a sense of autonomy. And those opportunities can reduce a number of troubling sensations. Interesting thing, though, about choice. Be aware that there are times that the last thing the person being cared for might want to do is to have to make a choice. Right? Pain, fatigue, fear, medications, any of these can make choosing too difficult. There are also situations where if you ask someone what it is that they want or need, they might have a hard time expressing that. But I find that if you then ask them what they don't want, you can sometimes back into a good solution from there. Once again, talking about, sorry, what do I want to say with here? Oh, yeah. So talking through as much of this as possible, as soon as possible. And of course, if possible, because we don't always have that as an option. This can bring about a faster and easier recovery. So basically, when we look at caregiving, we're looking at a partnership. The more partners communicate with one another openly and honestly, the better chances for a solid partnership. Now, there are unfortunately circumstances or conditions that preclude certain choices. For example, if someone is diabetic, their caregiver needs to be aware of their dietary needs and limitations, which might very well be in opposition to what the person being cared for would prefer. Ran into that with my sister Ellie prior to her transition. She was a diabetic and she was always craving all this sugary stuff, which would wreak havoc with her diabetes, of course. So we had to work through that with her, right? Find a way to mitigate the risks. A solid perspective for any caregiver is the same as we often hear for a doctor. The phrase, first, do no harm. Okay? But moving beyond that important first step, I would add that while I've heard many people say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I prefer to ask, if it ain't broke, can I make it better? So while we might set things up in a certain way as a caregiver, while the person being cared for might request certain things in a certain way, being open to change is another important choice for a caregiver. That might very well require extra effort. But remember, the goal here is to provide the best possible care in the most reasonable way. Choosing to honor the partnership of caregiving can allow both parties to maintain mutually agreed upon boundaries and reduce stress for all involved. Hi, Bonnie. This is Bonnie Gonzalez is your doula for grief. She has a wonderful show here on the New Thought Media Network on Mondays at 12 noon Pacific time. Bonnie says the caregiver needs to take care of themselves first. This will allow them to be better caregivers, also to give better care. I completely agree with that. However, I'm going to hold off on that, all right, because I have a lot to say about it. All right, now let's take a look at how caregiving affects our choices. We've been looking at how choices affect caregiving, so let's go the opposite way. Without a doubt, given the responsibilities of caregiving, how we choose to spend our time is definitely going to be affected, and it could be significantly affected. Because of the importance of our role as caregiver, there will be impacts on the amount of time we have, how we spend that time, how we schedule our time. Some of the choices, of course, can be predetermined based on the type of care that's required. So someone might need particular medication at particular times throughout the day or night or both. Ensuring that that happens is a primary consideration. Likewise, trips to physical or occupational therapy or doctor visits for treatments need to be scheduled and supported. There are also possible financial considerations that can impact the choices we make. Caregiving can be quite expensive, even with excellent health insurance. And that financial obligation will likely require very careful consideration when looking at one's budget. Now, I want you to bear in mind, each caregiving scenario is different. At the very least, the condition being addressed and the people involved. So the impacts of giving care might be relatively minor, or they could be quite involved and far-reaching, or anywhere in between. Which is why communication, dialogue is such an important part of the process. And the sooner that you choose to address it, the better. Also, ensuring that you communicate with all the affected parties is key to ensuring the best care. Always remembering to involve the person being cared for, of course, whenever that is possible. But all of the different people. So it is not uncommon for there to be a team of people who are involved in the caregiving. As I said earlier, some of them might be professionals, they might be paid, they might be volunteers. But anyone who is involved needs to be considered. It sometimes happens during caregiving that the mental capacity or the physical abilities of the person being cared for decline, which prompts the need to reassess and to reconsider things like, what is the most effective type of care? What is the location where care can best be given? Who would be best equipped to provide the necessary care? And then, of course, how does the person being cared for feel about all of that? If they can tell you, they can't always, depending upon what it is that's going on within them. So, just as it is important to have a legally binding document, a will, for example, to describe the disposition of finances and possessions when we reach the end of our life, well, so too is it important to have a living will or an advanced health directive to describe a person. Let me try that again. To describe a person's wishes regarding medical treatment. Whenever possible, choose to develop these documents as soon as possible and review them periodically so that should the time come to put them in place, there's no confusion, there's no chaotic maneuvering trying to honor what you believe one's last wishes might have been. And not just one's last wishes, but also if someone becomes unresponsive, knowing what it is that they would want you to do under those circumstances is incredibly important. We want to be able to respect that person. Okay? So as you've certainly noticed, I'm sure, I'm pushing really heavily on communication and collaboration. Right? Because when you get right down to it, any relationship does better when all parties are clear about who they are, what they value, what energizes them, and what they find discouraging or disparaging. This exploration today, I've focused on caregiving, with the primary focus being on the person being cared for. As I mentioned, though, there is another aspect that's of paramount importance. And as Bonnie alluded to it, it's about self-care. However, given that self-care is something that should be a part of everyone's life every day, there's a lot to explore. So I want to cover that in its own episode. We're going to do that in a couple of weeks. All right, so next week is Thanksgiving, and I'm going to do a rebroadcast next week of my show on gratitude. And then the week after that, I'm going to pick up with the importance of self-care and how the choices we make can bring about the best possible situation there as well. Okay, so that's going to do it for today. If you'd like to explore choice and caregiving further, or if you'd like to suggest a topic relating to choice for a future episode, or if you'd like to have a counseling session or prayer, please email me. Be more than happy to speak with you. You can email me here at zodimuro@gmail.com. Always interested in hearing what you have to say. All right. So it was wonderful, as always, to spend this time with you. Give yourself a gift. The gift of exploration of New Thought Media Network. Go to ntmedia.org and check out the more than 40 hours of programming that we have each week. Today, for example, just a few of the things that are going on. 1 p.m. Mountain Time, Finding the Joy in the Journey with the delightful Reverend Gina Calvario Krupka. Our special guest today is Reverend Cindy Grimes. 2 p.m. Mountain Time, Vibrant Living Hour with Practitioner Ken Ludwig. 4 p.m. Mountain Time, Reverend Brock Ford presents the Spiritual Toolkit. And folks, we here at the New Thought Media Network have a mission, and that mission is to bring the joy of New Thought to the widest audience possible. To present all of this, we need your support. So please spread the word about New Thought Media Network. Do so on your social, on your social media pages. Do so word of mouth. Tell folks at your spiritual center, at your church, at your synagogue, your mosque. Let them know that we have so much wonderful stuff going on here. And we'd love for them to be a part of it. And while you're at it, if you can go to ntmedia.org/donate, you could help us make this a world that works for everyone. Oh, you're very welcome, Bonnie. And I wish the best Thanksgiving to you as well. You're very welcome, Shay. Thank you for being here. All right, folks. Until we meet again, I encourage you to choose well. I encourage you to choose wisely. I encourage you to be fully, completely, absolutely who and whose you are. Be well.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Muro.